Hi, welcome to the Interverse of Business and Life podcast. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work has touched thousands of people's lives from around the world and whose new book might just shift the way you see yourself, your relationships, and the human experience entirely. Fiona Lukeis is a longtime relationship specialist. She's founder of the Relatable program and community. She's a coach whose work blends grounded insight, deep presence, and as you're going to hear her talk about, love. Her new book, Funny Little Human, is a beautiful and down to earth invitation to look at our humanness with more lightness, more love, and a whole lot less judgment. In this conversation with Fiona, she and I explore what it means to meet ourselves and others with more compassion, why emotional freedom changes everything, and how seeing the innocence in our funny little human moments creates space for connection, creativity, and healing. Whether you're navigating a tough relationship, leading a team, or simply feeling stuck in your own mind, I think that this episode will meet you in a really human way and gently open a new door for you. So let's dive in. Fiona, I am so glad to have you here and to be holding this book of yours, Funny Little Human. I love it. I love it.
Thank you, Barb. It's so good to see my book in your hands.
I know. Well, I can appreciate, maybe like a lot of us, I think about writing a book and, who knows, someday I will, but I know from other authors, like the immense amount of work that goes into it. And I just have to say how much I really enjoyed reading it. And I love the personal pieces you have in there and also the stories about clients. It's a very down to earth but inspiring book. And so I would love to start there and ask you, why Funny Little Human?
Well, that's a great question, Barb. I think for me, as human beings, we tend to overcomplicate life. We take life way too seriously. And when we do, people get really stuck. They get stuck in their rigid thinking, stuck in the rules of life, stuck in analyzing themselves and comparing themselves and judging themselves. And when we do that, we are a long way from love. And to me, love is what it's all about. When people see that they are love, when people look in the direction of love, when they come home to love, everything changes. To me, that's how humanity and consciousness change. And obviously, it has an enormously beneficial impact on our relationships. And I think there's a lot of humor in our humanness. I think we're a lot funnier than we give ourselves credit for. We are hilarious, even when we're in the midst of and I obviously I work in the relationship space. So to me, Funny Little Human encapsulates that part of us that just gets stuck and innocently gets lost and doesn't know what to do. And I found that with my program, I was using that term a lot, funny little human. And my students were then saying, "Oh, my funny little human got a bit stuck on the weekend." And it just, it's just something to me that brings lightness and relief to the human experience. And when we can look at ourselves through a lens of humor and loving humor, in particular, our frailties and the parts of ourselves that we kind of wish we didn't do or say, or, everyone's got that aspect of themselves. When you can relate to that with lightness, there's a lot more room for love.
Yeah, I that's amazing. I mean, as you say that, I'm thinking, I can have this tendency at times to feel like I'm behind. So I'm kind of rushing through everything. And when I realize I'm doing that, I don't really need to. I'm like, oh, you again? You know,
Yeah.
but I can really appreciate what you're saying around if we can hold that internal experience more lightly, it allows us to bring also along with it some maybe more wisdom or more grace, or we get through things easier. And I'm curious, Fiona, what was it that was the sort of, what did you see, what happened for you in your own life and your own journey that sort of was the impetus or the wake up call around all of this?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Barb. Definitely, I was my own worst critic. And I went through a period where I was a pretty angry person, had a lot of anger at myself, anger at the world. I felt the world was a very harsh and unfair place, and that things never really went my way. So they seemed to work out for other people, but not for me. And so I would look out and see other people, I feel, having an easier time of life than me, or people who were just seemed to move through life with more ease. And I'd be like, why? What is it that they have a more easeful experience of life, and I'm still so hung up on stuff? And I'd done a lot of different programs and courses and things over the years looking for that answer, or maybe not even sure what I was looking for, just wanting to feel less uptight and less overwhelmed by life, I guess. And I think for me, there was a pivotal moment where I saw my self righteousness, because I was really good at self righteousness, and I saw my judgment of myself and others, and I found it funny. And I looked at myself and it was like, look at your human go. Look at it. Wow, it is really self righteous today. You are right up there today, Fee. But I didn't see it as this aspect of myself that needed fixing and changing. I just saw it as a place that I went sometimes. It was more of a habit of being rather than this is who I am. And it was the most freeing thing. And I realized that when I looked at my humanness through that lens, there was a lot more room for the things that you just mentioned: love, humility, grace, playfulness, forgiveness, kindness, compassion. And that's what started to fill me up. And more as I saw that, I found my human funnier. It's humorous. And I remember having a session with a client, this lady, gorgeous lady, and she was really sharing a story of what a nightmare her husband had been about something. And she was getting right into this story. And I started smiling. I couldn't help it because I actually found it quite funny. And she was doing a bit of and then he did this, and then I said this, and then we did this. And as she's talking, I couldn't help it. I went, this is actually hilarious. And it's not to diminish her story, but she saw me smiling and she started laughing. And we were both just belly laughing hysterically together. And she said, oh my goodness, this is actually funny. I said, I want you to know I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. What you've just shared. And she said, my human just had a massive temper tantrum, and so did his. And this is what we generated. I went, yep, pretty much. That's what that is, right? And as she laughed, this incredible lightness came over her. And I just thought to myself over and over, that was a phrase that kept coming through my mind. We are just funny little humans, and we're funnier than we think we are. And there's something incredibly freeing when we see it. And so I wanted to write a book that saw the lightness around our frailties and our insecurities and those aspects of ourselves. And to me, even though I got lots of feedback, Barb, saying, well, Fiona, if you want to position yourself as a credible person in this space, it really should be, a more structured title. And I went, no, this is the title that's coming through. This is what I'm being called to write, and I'm going to trust in it. And, the people who need to hear that will see what I'm pointing to.
Yeah. And how did that realization that you started to have to see that there was, those funny little human moments, and then there's something else? How did that realization lead to you doing the relationship work that you do?
Well, I could see that when we take our relationship issues really seriously and we approach it from that, I've got a problem that we need to fix. There's this big issue. There's a heaviness that we bring. There's a seriousness that we bring. There's an intensity that we bring. There's an energetic frequency that we bring that repels the other person. It literally repels the other person. And so you can sit down and you might think, okay, we're going to talk about this problem. But immediately when I'm in that intense, serious energy, the other person is now on guard. They're in defense mode before a word has been spoken. That's because we are interacting energetically before we are physically always. We're energetic beings. And our energetic frequency enters the room before we do. And this is our biggest blind spot. A lot of people will say to me, well, I thought that thing, but I didn't say it. So it's like, as soon as you think it, it's in your energy field, right? And you can't hide that. You cannot, it's the one thing we can't hide. Our energy speaks for us, and it speaks the truth around where our state of mind is anyway. And so when people approach, and I found that people would approach problems from that with a serious energy, all it would do is create more problem and create more defensiveness. And then people would create this history of not dealing with conflict or problems well. And as soon as you create a history of that, things really do unravel. Goodwill disappears. People overthink things. They analyze things. They're hypersensitive to every small sigh, look, word, and things just become harder and harder. But when you approach something with a lightness of being, when your energy is lighter, and it is possible to do that, when you sit down and you're looking through that lens, it's incredible what people can create together and how they can get over something that looked like a monumental issue with a sense of ease and calm and compassion and understanding. Because in my mind, and if we're just talking about relationships at the moment, when there's enough understanding, there is no conflict. Conflict can only exist in an absence of understanding. And so, and a big part of that creation of that understanding is the energy that you lead with. And so I found that, and people started to feel it within themselves when they were able to look at it. And I saw that within myself. When I was looking at my human with humor, I could look at my husband's human with humor, my children's human with humor, and I could see the innocence in it all. And so there's just so much more room for understanding, playfulness, kindness, curiosity, the things that we all wish we could bring. I've now worked with, I don't even know, thousands of people now. And that is a common thing that people say to me. I want to be lighter when things are heavy. I wish I could bring more curiosity. I wish I wasn't so triggered. I wish I didn't go straight from A to B, that I was able to sit in between those spaces. And to me, when we can do that through a lens of, when we can see the humor in our humanness, and there's a humor, to me, that's universal, there's so much more room for that to actually happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I'm just thinking of a listener that might be like, yeah, but it's not funny. My partner and I aren't getting along, or we're close to divorce, or they don't see me, they don't hear me. So how would you respond to that?
Well, if someone came to me and said that we're close to divorce, my partner can't hear me or see me, the first thing I'm not going to say is, well, isn't that funny, right? Because I get that that's you're right, people are a long way away from that point. But to me, the first step, if you are in that situation, is you need to have first and foremost a deeper understanding of your own humanness first, right? To me, that's where it all begins. If I have a deeper understanding of my own humanness and how things actually work, and we are not taught this stuff, we're really not. We're taught to manage ourselves, change ourselves, fix ourselves, overcome, reframe, but we're not really taught a deep understanding of how we work as human beings. We're not given a great sense of our own humanness. And when I say humanness, I'm talking about the fact that, and I talk about this in my book, that we are a soul first and a human second. People tend to see themselves as a human first. To me, we're always a soul first, and the human is the vehicle for that. It's not the main party in all of this, even though it looks that way. And so when you have a deeper understanding of that, you're able to look at, even if your partner's not seeing you, or they're not listening, or you're feeling like you're on opposite planets, you're able to show up to that without the resentment and the defensiveness and the hurt. And when those things aren't in your energy, it's extraordinary what that allows for two people to bring to one another. Because when we show up from a place of hurt and pain and resentment, another person can feel that. So they bring their own version of hurt, pain, and resentment. And so you have hurt, pain, and resentment meeting hurt, pain, and resentment. And that's not the space where you're going to resolve anything from. That's where you just create more of the same. And so in order for that to change. One of you needs to bring something different. And this is how powerful human beings are. And we don't understand how powerful we are. That's the other piece to this. Human beings do not have a, seriously, we are so far away. And I can't say I have a full understanding of it either, of how powerful we are and what we have the capacity to create. And so for me, it's like if someone came to me with that, instead of giving you a bunch of techniques on how to communicate better or how to be in rapport or all of those things, which is a very intellectual human kind of that humanness aspect, I'd say let's sit back, let me teach you a few things about how we work so that you can show up differently. Now, you might be listening to this and thinking, why do I have to be the one to show up differently? And all I can say is that someone has to. And if you're the one looking for answers and you're open to it, why not you? Because it is the most beautiful thing to learn and to understand that you're not locked into an experience of something. I think is something everybody should know. Everybody should have the gift of. To me, it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. Yeah. To know that I'm not locked into, because I very much saw life that way. I'm locked into this experience because of ABC.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think you're touching on it, but I know in the book you talk about that there are three key relationships. So as you were just talking, the relationship with you, yourself, your relationship with life, and your relationship with others. And I wonder if it makes sense here, Fiona, to talk a little bit more about what that means for you and how that helps us then begin to create the kind of relationships, personal and professional, that we want.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think, we tend to, when we look at relationships, if you think about it, we are in relationship always. Every moment of every day, we are in relationship. We're either in relationship with ourselves, so how we perceive the world, our thinking about life, how we feel about it, how we see ourselves, like all of that, our relationship with ourselves, we are always in relationship there. Then we're always in relationship with life. And so what does that mean? Do you take things personally when life doesn't go your way? I know I used to. I used to see that as a personal thing against me. It was me against life. And I know there are many people who go through life that way, right? And so do you believe that things work out for you? Do you believe that life or the universe, whatever you want to call it, has your back? That even when things don't go your way, there's something in there for you to learn and grow from. Because remember, this is the soul first and the human second. And our soul, our non-physical self, is here to evolve and grow and expand. And as we all know, whether we want to admit it or not, we tend to expand and grow through discomfort rather than when things are going perfectly. And that the reason for that is because we don't look for answers when things are going really well. Human beings are going to go, okay, great. Our minds aren't as open. So, there's this, to me, that's a huge aspect. I see many people who've had something difficult happen in their lives, and then they've never forgiven life for that. They've seen that as a personal affront to them. And now if you go into a relationship with someone and you see that life does not have your back, you are going to take things very personally, far more personally than someone who doesn't. You're going to find it hard to let things go. You're going to find it hard to let go of the past. You're going to hold on tightly and want more control. Now, when we're in relationship with others, if you're someone who's holding tightly onto control, if you can't let go of the past, what do you think is going to happen to the kinds of conversations you're now generating? You're going to constantly talk about that mistake or that upset or that thing that person did 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years ago. I hear this all the time. And you're going to bring it into the now. And so your relationship then becomes a regurgitated version of a memory of you that you've had about the past. And so it's not fresh and vibrant and moving forward. It's a constant replay. And so if you are someone who's having constant replays, then I would say to you that perhaps there's something around life that you haven't let go of, that you might want to look at your relationship with life. Because when we approach life with an open mind and an open heart, and even when things don't go our way, because things are never going to always go our way, that's just not how life works, right? So, there's so much in that that I feel affects our relationships with others. And so, if you're also someone who's not comfortable in your own skin, and many people are not, you're going to be more defensive if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I was really upset by that thing you said to me last week," or "You said that you do this and you haven't done this." Do you know what I mean? You're kind of always going to be in combative mode rather than listening, understanding, humility mode. And these are things that we need to be able to bring to the table in order to have deeper, richer relationships with others. So for me, our relationships with others can't just be looked at as a singular thing. It's more a reflection. Your relationship with others is to me is a reflection of those two things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so in determining a relationship, if that's something you want to be better at, or you want to grow a deeper connection with someone, you've got to be looking at these three areas.
Well, and I'm wondering if a personal example might help so you can share or you can let me know. But, with the last person I dated, I remember he was this really amazing, very interesting guy. And we had always a lot of fun and great conversations. And I remember thinking, I just wish he were a little bit more emotionally present, just available, emotionally available. And then I don't know, at some point in there, I kind of heard myself, and realized like, huh, what am I? Am I emotionally available and present? And so that's kind of what I hear and what you're saying. It's like I really had to see, like, oh, yeah, there's a way I'm not doing that. And to come back to what you were saying before, that is my contribution to that current climate, is that I
Beautiful.
was walking around sort of waiting for him to do something first. It wasn't a conscious thought that linear, but I realized it's like, oh, yeah,
Mm,
I'm saying things like if he were more emotionally available or present, I would feel safer. Like I had all these kinds of things
yeah.
and then realized, oh, wait a minute. No, no, no. How am I showing up? How am I showing up to the relationship and also to myself?
Yeah, beautiful, Barb. I love that. That's that self-inquiry first. To me, I see it as I'm navigating myself before I'm navigating anything else. We tend to see life in terms of how is that in relationship to us versus how are we in relationship to that. And so to me, that's a beautiful example of that. If you can see I don't feel like this person's emotionally available, or I don't feel like this person's listening to me. The first place you want to start is, well, what am I bringing to that? And then having a deep knowing of that and doing that in a way that has humility. So the way you just express that, Barb, is to me, there's a lot of humility in that. You're not judging yourself, you're not making yourself wrong, you're just, it's a gentle inquiry. Okay, am I as present as I could be? What can I bring here? And so it's almost like making sure that you've taken care of everything on your side. There's something so freeing about that. And one of the reasons it's so freeing is when you're clear, as clear as you can be. I mean, we all have blind spots, okay? But when you're clear on, yeah, I can see that I could be a little more present, or I could see that my mind's busy right now. I'm not listening as well as I could. And you're able to gently correct that within yourself, and you have that clarity. It makes it easier for you to also be able to see what belongs to you and what belongs to somebody else. And to me, that's vitally important in a relationship because people carry things that don't belong to them. And
Yeah.
then they get burdened and overwhelmed by that. And that gets in the way of the relationship as well. And so that clarity of, okay, I feel like I'm bringing everything I can right now, or I'm not capable of it right now, so I'm going to do it, take a walk, take a break, do whatever. You've got that understanding of yourself. It's so important. It just means then you can see what you're generating and what you're creating and what you're capable of and not capable of. And that clarity just means that you stay in your emotional lane. And
Yeah.
to me, that's a big mistake people make. They merge emotional lanes, and all of a sudden now they're trying to fix someone, manage someone. They're getting all worked up over what someone else has or hasn't dealt with. And then that just is a breeding ground for resentment, dissatisfaction, combativeness, all of that kind of thing, which erodes goodwill and all those great feelings that
Yeah.
we need.
Yeah. And I think even, thinking about teams and companies, and I'm thinking of an organization, this team in particular, that really believed that they were unintentionally creating this adversarial kind of climate. And so when people came in to present their ideas, when I was doing intake calls with them, they would say things like, yeah, if you can't argue it to the nth degree and back everything you're saying, you just get eaten up. So, yet the people that were leading those kind of discussions were thinking, yeah, like if you push and you're aggressive and you challenge, then people sort of rise to the occasion, and you're challenging the idea, not the person. But to your point, the people in that situation start to feel uncomfortable. And in a way, it was like creating this tension. Well, then those people were leaving, and rather than coming to these conversations with their own creative thinking, they were now showing up trying to figure out what the other person wanted to hear. And
Yeah.
then it was like kind of flat, and there wasn't as much life, and then it looked like they didn't really know what they were doing. So just another example, I think, of what I hear you saying is, when we have inside of us, our own internal climate is more open and neutral and receptive and listening, that we create a climate for more connection, problems to get resolved. And in the case I'm talking about, once they lightened up, to your point, and allowed people to show up with half baked ideas versus, being able to argue every data point, then what they found was creative energy actually increased, and creative output increased.
Yes, that's exactly right, Barb. And when you value things like that, creative energy and output and things, and you allow space for that, the sky's the limit on what we can experience, generate. It really is. That's a great example. I think we tend to feel like if we're going into a problem, we've got to be, as you say, on, and it's got to be, we can come into this rigidity, and which diminishes our capacity for creativity, for fresh thinking, for ideas, for playfulness and fun, and it becomes very serious and very hard. That's why I tend to disagree with the narrative that's out there that relationships require a lot of work and relationships are hard. Now I know that that can trigger people because they go, "No, you've got to work hard, and relationships are hard." And I'm like, they can be. There's no doubt about it. They can be difficult, but they don't have to be. To me, they are, whether it's a work relationship, an intimate relationship, a parenting relationship, a friend relationship, your relationship with you, the most important one, right? They are our biggest opportunity to grow and evolve. Nothing triggers us more emotionally than our relationships. Nothing. And so nothing gives us the biggest opportunity to grow and evolve and expand and learn to get over ourselves and put stuff down and show up again. I mean, it's so good for our human, so good for our soul. And, when you value things like that, rather than we've got to fix this problem, when you value fresh thinking and creativity and ideas, I mean, you just bring out the best in people, and people are amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think, what you're saying too about the seeing the funny little human, I have a client that was just sharing a story that she had been away for the weekend and went home, and the spatula, right? Do they say spatula in Australia,
Yes, actually, yes.
So was in the drawer and not in the canister on the counter, right? So she said that she was looked and saw it in the drawer and started to pull it out, and then she could hear her thoughts, like she could hear like, this does not belong here. Why is this here? Why can't, like, she could hear it, right? And then she realized what you're saying. She sort of was like, man, look at me. Like, I'm acting like that thought is a golden rule and everyone should live by. And if they don't, and she said, and I saw it, and she said, she was able to see it with some humor and lightness. And then as she put the spatula where it belongs, according to her, right? But that moment of awareness of seeing thought, and that she could keep following that story, that idea. Or in this one, it was kind of a fun, ridiculous example. But what she said was, prior, that would not have been a silly example. It would have been truth. That
Yeah.
she said the story I would have built up in my mind about him is he doesn't listen, he can't do anything, he doesn't care, he doesn't, right? But because she saw the funny little human, as you're saying it, the thoughts that come in that we don't control, they just come in. But if we have a distance to them, we can relate to them differently, then we're able to like see them with a little bit more perspective.
That's right. And then that diffuses everything.
Yeah.
Because those little moments, Barb, those are the moments that destroy relationships.
Yeah.
It's hundreds or thousands or numerous little moments like that where that thought looks true. He knows I don't like the spatula being there. Why can't he? I've told him 100 times. He obviously doesn't care. He doesn't. And that little thought just sits there like a little piece of resentment. And because we see it as true, we carry it with us. And then there'll be another little one and another little one. And then they all build until we are in this overall feeling of dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
And then that is permeating our energy field.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so your husband walks in the door, or your wife walks in the door, or your partner, and you're kind of not as warm and loving.
Yeah.
You're a bit more, you're a bit more, you're holding back a little bit, right? You're not as emotionally available. And then the other person's like, why? What's going on? And so there's these little moments that erode things. And then from there, when people are in that state of dissatisfaction, they sit down and go, we need to talk.
Yeah.
And you can see from there, nothing great can come from that. Nothing inspired. People are just going to bunker down even harder into what they see as true. And to me, it just becomes emotional ping pong.
Yeah.
So that moment is so important, because all of a sudden, instead of carrying that dissatisfaction, she's able to laugh or let it go. And it's not in her energy field.
Yeah.
And this is the crux of everything in my mind. This is it. So your capacity to see that will determine how relatable you are and the kind of connections that you generate. People who see that versus people who do not have a completely different experience of everything. Because each one of those moments takes away from your emotional bandwidth. And people with little emotional bandwidth take things personally. They're more defensive, they're more reactionary, they hold things, they carry things. And that to me, it flavors everything
Mm,
until you're
mm,
looking at life, which was me. That was
yeah.
me, looking at life through a lens of frustration, dissatisfaction, annoyance, judgment. And so especially if you're someone, which was me, if you're really quick to react, that's a sign that your emotional bandwidth isn't there.
Yeah.
Once I started having emotional bandwidth, those moments looked funny to me. And they stopped making sense. Like, why would I get upset about that? I don't want to be in the feeling of that, and there's just so much more room for something else.
And I think what that piece around when you have more perspective to your thinking, when you're not, you don't feel justified, you don't lean into the justification of that ill will or bad feeling,
Yeah.
that right, it just moves through and you naturally have more perspective. And what I hear you saying is in that natural place, we just are emotional and mental bandwidth is there. So we are
So,
able to let things roll off our back or see them for what they are.
yeah.
And I know, though, Fiona, you spoke a little bit about this at the beginning. And at the beginning of your book, you have a love letter to everyone. And so you've mentioned that like love is who we are, or love is at the core. And I'm wondering, like, what does that have to do with what you're saying also, this emotional bandwidth place? And if we don't want to contribute tension and criticism and upset to the climate, you're not saying get better thinking. You're not saying switch your mindset. You're saying something else. So, what are you saying? Sorry, that took a long time to get to that
No,
question.
no, no, that's great, Bob. Thank you for that distinction. I think it's very, very important, because you're right. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's a knowingness There's a truth inside us all that's the same. We all have the same truth, and it connects every human being on the planet. And it goes beyond gender or personality types or culture or religion or education. It's not about any of those things. What is the word I'm trying to say? It transponds, transcends. That's the word.
Trans-
Far out. It transcends all of those things. And when you see it, when you experience it, it is the most beautiful feeling, and you want more of it. And so you start to become highly aware of the thinking that takes you away from that place. And because that feeling is so calming and grounded and it's so true, you will see this. This is something that can only be experienced. It cannot be described. It's like me trying to experience the color blue to someone who's never seen the color blue. You have to see it, right? But when you do, it's a space that you want to protect. It's a space that you want to spend time in. And so the resentment, the justification, it just doesn't make as much sense. It's like, why would I be there when I can be here? And of course, once you spend time here, your energy changes. And when your energy changes, it impacts the collective. It just does, because we are so powerful. Your heart energy changes. Did you know that a human being's heart, the magnetic frequency of a human heart can be felt 5 kilometers away, right? And so this year is the year of the heart for me. I'm doing a lot of learning, exploring around heart.
Good.
This, see the heart on my book, and very
That's
beautiful friend
beautiful.
of mine painted this for me. But to me, it's like my heart resonance. I want that to be open and as close to my natural state as possible. That's what I care about.
Yeah.
And so love is who we are. It's the space we come back to naturally. You'll notice it after you've calmed down from being upset or frustrated. You come down to a place of calm. Maybe you look out the window and you notice how beautiful the sky is, or you see a beautiful bird, or something simple touches you. That's a great indicator that you are in that natural loving state of mind. That's just where human beings reside. They come back there. And when we are in that state of mind, everything looks different. Everything. Your husband, your kids, your life, everything looks different. You just naturally have access to different thinking. It's a natural phenomena. It's not something you're managing. It just naturally shows up. And then from there, compassion, curiosity, understanding, kindness, they just naturally show up because they are a natural function of that state. And so to me, why would I not want to be there? And I can honestly say that with my clients, students, anyone who has an experience of that, they just want more of it. And you become very aware or less tolerant of the things that take you away from that place. This is amazing for our relationships. It's amazing for our well-being. It's just amazing for each individual. And so as you're in a higher state of well-being naturally, you are naturally kinder and compassionate and loving, and you seriously are. It's just natural. It is not something you have to manage. And to me, that's where the ease around relationships, where I say relationships can actually be, they don't have to be hard, they don't have to be complicated. I know they can be, but they don't have to be.
Well, and I think the invitation really too is so many of us are just, in the doer mode and, going through life, but to start to get a awareness around that, what you're saying. Am I living in a feeling of edge, of criticism for myself, other people, my partner, my coworker, whatever that might be? And the invitation is, can I drop in? Can I find more goodwill or neutrality, or ease off the ideas I have about the person and see what else might be there?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I promise you, there is always something else.
Yeah.
There is never not something else. There is always, always something else.
Yeah. Well, Fiona, thank you so much for being here. I just want to give you a chance before we end. Is there anything else that's present for you that you'd like to share or say?
Yeah, thanks, Barb. I just want to say for anyone listening, I want you to know that you are not an exception to what Barb and I are talking about. There is no exception to this. It doesn't exist. I promise you. And so whatever you feel that may have happened in your past or in recent times in your life, it does not take away from what we are talking about here. And for me, looking in this direction, if you give yourself the chance to do that, there is just so much on offer, because this is what will change the world. One heart, one mind, one soul, one human, funny little human at a time, because we are that powerful. You are that powerful.
Beautiful. A perfect place to end. Thank you so much, Fee.
You're welcome, Barb. Thanks for having me.
As always, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean a lot to us if you could take a moment to first subscribe and follow wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Hitting the follow button means you'll never miss a show. All you have to do is hit the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you like what you're hearing, we'd appreciate you taking a moment to give us a shout out and review. Most importantly, however, if you know anyone that would benefit from this episode, please pass it along. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about my work, Innerverse Academy, or upcoming events, you can check out my website at barbarapatterson.com. You'll find some great resources, classes, and videos, and a lot more. Thank you again for being here. See you next time.